Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of the Remind podcast, where we combine neuroscience, spirituality, and
We found the start.
Welcome to episode 16 of the Remind podcast, where we combine neuroscience, spirituality, and personal development to help you heal your deepest wounds and transform your life. Today, Dave and I are going to be speaking on a topic that's very close to both of our hearts because we've both lived it on both sides of the spectrum. We are talking about the concept of broken homes. Now, stay with us. Broken homes are not what society says a broken home is, but that is what we are going to be discussing today. So, starting our conversation today, Dave, I want to know, you've been on the experience of what society would consider a broken home as both the child and the parent of children.
The big topic. I won't say I like this topic, but it's been something that I've been aware of, been talking about recently with other people. Being someone who has shared custody with his own kids, because the mother of my kids and I have separated, have done now for 6-7 years, something like that. And so it's something that my kids deal with, and my parents have separated, but they didn't separate until they were much older. But definitely the definition of a broken home in the traditional sense, I feel sort of stems back from the 50s, right? Because a broken home means that mum and dad no longer are together. And so if they're not together, it's broken. And so if you go back to the 50s, when I would hear about it from my grandparents and my parents, it doesn't matter how miserable you were in the relationship, you stay together for the kids.
Yeah.
Or you stay together because there's nothing worse than being in a relationship or being that sort of person that's separated from their partner. Because maybe you didn't try hard enough. Maybe you didn't do all of these things. I think what we're talking about in this is, what is the definition of a broken home? Yes, we've got this traditional definition of what the broken home is, where you've got the parents no longer live together, and then you've got the kids swapping between houses, which does come with its own issues. But imagine placing this term of broken home where two people are together that shouldn't be together anymore. In my mind, and this is my very, very personal opinion, that's more broken than anything else, because your kids are now center stage of what exactly?
Yeah.
Not a loving relationship, not a loving marriage. Maybe conflict, maybe tension, but certainly not love.
Maybe just an undertone of unhappiness and unfulfillment, which is still not positive.
Absolutely. But the benefit of being in that environment for the child is, well, at least mum and dad are still together, right?
Yeah.
So there is benefits to that. So I'd be interested to explore both sides of this, even though, spoiler alert, for me, being in a relationship that models the wrong thing for the child, for me, absolutely is more damaging to the child than staying together for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, we are on the same page there. I just was thinking, when you said staying together for the kids, it reminded me, maybe that's what we should call this episode. It reminded me ages and ages ago, I did a TikTok video, and I think I called it something like, should I stay stay together? Should we stay together for the kids or something like that?
Mm.
And I had complete strangers who I didn't know comment on that video saying, thank you, I so needed to hear that. Almost like they just needed someone to tell them that it was okay to end a relationship that was unhealthy and that you're not going to mess your kids up for the rest of your life if you do. And
that's the biggest sorry to jump in there. That's the biggest thing.
yeah,
The people that do stay, they're not doing it because of any other reason, that they there's a genuine feeling, and this is something that I'd love for you to talk more about, is if it's for the kid and if there's evidence out there that sort of says being with them is better than not, then, because people are doing it for that very good reason. They're trying to be the best parent they can above and beyond the needs of themselves, which to me is a very heroic thing to be doing.
100%. And it shows a misguided interpretation of what's best for the kids, right? And what I've found is that quite often I will pre-frame this with the context that I had parents who stayed together for the kids. And I distinctly remember writing in my journal when I would have been in primary school. I remembered writing in my journal that I wished my parents would just break up because our house was so unhappy and not connected, and there was no love between them. They hadn't shared a bed in years and all this kind of stuff. And it actually hurt me going to things like, like school award nights and presentation nights and all that sort of stuff. And seeing my friends, I remember being shocked going to places like that, seeing my friends' parents walking in holding hands or actually, putting their arm around each other and having affection, and observing that going, my parents don't do that. Gee, I wish my parents would hold hands. I want nothing more than for my parents to show each other affection. Like that felt really nice. And so something that I've come across quite a lot is this misperception of what's in the best interest for the kids. And quite often, as hard, like literally as harsh as this is, it comes down to like a practicality thing. Like if I stay in a relationship, I have two incomes, usually. Quite often there's two incomes to support one household, which means the perceived quality of life that you could have of two incomes and only running one household is better. We can go on more holidays. I can buy them better presents. I can afford brand name clothes. We can go out for dinner and we can afford all these things, these lifestyle things that we overlay an assumption that our children are going to have a better life if we can provide them with more of these materialistic things.
Or at least not leave them wanting, I suppose, is what you're sort of saying.
Yes.
Sorry, we can't do that because we can't do that because we can't do that because we can't do that because,
Yeah, 100%. And so that actually has been a massive driving force behind a lot of the people that I've worked with. And interestingly, when I do a lot of inner child work with clients, and something that has been really interesting. So I work with adults, and as part of working with adults, we resolve their childhood wounds. And so many adults that I have worked with have ended up resolving wounds. Never, ever once have I had someone have to resolve a wound because their house wasn't a mansion or because they didn't get to go on all these holidays every year and things like that. But I sure as heck have had a lot of people have to resolve wounds because their parents were not able to be present with them, because the mental and emotional and relational state of their home was not connected and safe and somewhere that was a positive environment. And that was really confronting for me as an adult, because I could relate to that as a child myself and go, wow, even back then when I was just in primary school, I knew that I wanted my parents to be more loving towards each other. I knew that I wanted this, because when I saw that in my friends' parents, I'd go, oh, I really want that. So when it came to my own, you go.
No, you go.
When it came to my own relationship in a marriage that was very unhealthy to the father of my children, I really was reflecting on that from a number of different angles, going, well, yeah, my life is actually kind of easier logistically and practically. My life is easier if we stay together. We've got two good incomes. We can afford a lot more. I have practical help around the house. Like, there's another adult who can take on some of the load with cleaning and cooking and child minding. Like, what an awful way to even think about that, right? I.e. parenting. But also, my life wasn't easier by staying in that marriage. My life was very hard in that marriage because I was emotionally, my needs weren't met. There was a lot of other issues. So it was a situation of choosing the hard of staying together, in which case, if we stayed together, my children had parents who were not connected, who were not close. There was no love or joy or peace in the home. And the impacts that has on a developing child's mind are significant. And we'll probably go further into that soon. So how does that resonate with your experience?
Yeah, well, like from my parents, they probably separated when I was like 19. So for me, it was sad, but it was sort of something that it didn't affect me like it had affected my children when I left their mother. So my oldest was 5 and my youngest was just turning 2. So this is very early on in the piece, right? So
exactly the same ages of my kids. I did not know that.
No joke. Okay.
I didn't know that.
All
2
right.
and 5. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the youngest one doesn't necessarily know any different. Like, it's sort of his remembrance is of the two different households. But the eldest one does remember the pain because she was 5. She doesn't remember the actual details because we still talk about it. She doesn't talk about the exact details, but she still does remember the pain of it. And she still sort of does raise every now and again about myself and their mother getting back together again, because there's that genuine want of, hey, there was that sensation, that feeling that she had, because this is my eldest daughter, Darcy. I know she's listening. Hello, Darcy. Is there was some memories of good stuff that we did together, right? She didn't necessarily see so much of the disconnect that was there. She probably felt it but didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But there was massive disconnect. But what she does remember is some of those fun times, being able to hold dad's hand in one hand and mum's hand in the other and walk together and sort of feeling that sort of real connection. And I guess probably a question I'll pose to you as a young girl going through this, because I didn't go through this. I definitely went through. As I look back, my parents were never that cohesive. They had loving times, but they were very rare when I go back and look at it. But I didn't know any better as a child. And so for me, it was what it was. So I'm interested to explore a bit further with you, knowing the difference between this is what it normally is, right? Mum and dad don't, sleep in the same bed. Mum and dad don't really spend too much time, but they'll tolerate each other. They'll work together if they have to clean the kitchen or whatever it is, right? You don't know any better. How do you find that? And especially for the child, and especially when you're doing it for the child, and all you can think about is that heartbreak. Could you imagine telling the child, I'm leaving your father, I'm leaving your mother, I'm leaving, and the child goes, but why? From your point of view, I'd really like to look at how did you know any different?
Yeah, that's massive. And that is honestly the biggest thing. I have coached people through conscious breakups. And what does that actually mean? Well, it means, how do we break up in a way that we can still love and honor each other where we're not messing up our kids? Because in what you just asked, you had a fundamental assumption that what you were telling the children had to be heartbreaking.
Well, why
So
wouldn't it be? I mean, from a child's point of view that may know some of the nuances of what's going on, but doesn't know the full picture yet,
the
especially if they're
child is
dealing.
going to receive that information in the way that we deliver it. So it's something I was really conscious of when it came to my kids. And I knew that it's kind of like, have you ever experienced a child who falls over and they're okay, but they look to the adults to see how to respond?
The
And if the
reaction,
adults
yeah.
are like, oopsie daisy, you're okay, then they're like, ah, and they get up and they brush themselves off and they're okay.
Mm,
But if the adult goes, oh, then the child freaks out and goes, ah, okay, right?
mm, mm,
So a child's reaction to something, because everything is new to them, every experience is new to them. And so how they respond to something or react to something is very dependent upon us, the energy that we bring to it. And so when it came time for us to explain to our kids that mummy and daddy love each other, but we're not going to be married anymore, we're going to live in different houses. And we had no idea if the way that we handled it or not was right. We didn't have anything to go off other than
mm,
I was really, really intentional that my pain was mine and not my kids.
mm,
And so I didn't have any feedback on how we did until one day my car was getting serviced and my ex-husband had picked my son and I up and brought us home. And as we were driving, Elijah said, guys, thank you so much for living in different houses. And we looked at each other and we were like, it was like one of those stop the clock moments, almost like where time stands still. And we just looked at each other and we were like, what? And I asked him, what do you mean, mate? And he goes, well, before when you guys lived in the same house, mummy used to cry a lot and daddy used to yell a lot. And now you live in different houses and mummy's happy and daddy's happy. Thank you for living in different houses. And that was
and that's coming from a 5-year-old at the
well,
time.
he was 6 then.
Yeah.
And
No, but I'm
so
saying when you left, he was
we
5.
separated and he was 5.
Yeah.
And so that was the first piece of evidence that I had where I was reassured in how we had handled things, because I was hurting. Absolutely, I was hurting. And I had massive insecurities and fears come up around what life was going to look like and being alone and who would want me. I'm a single mum with 2 little kids and all these fears and insecurities and all this stuff coming to the surface. But bigger than all of that was knowing how my kid's brain was developing and not wanting to project my pain onto them. So how I framed the conversation was exactly that. Sometimes there was a song that actually I used to play on repeat, and it was I'll have to find it. Maybe I'll find it and we can link it in the comments to the show notes. But it was literally talking about sometimes mums and dads fall out of love. Sometimes 2 homes are better than one. Sometimes, and it was just playing on repeat. It just spoke into my heart. And I heard that song while I was driving home from visiting my husband at the time. And it was when I heard that song, I burst into tears. And that was the moment that I knew that our relationship was done. It was like that song was speaking to me, and I have no idea how it even ended up on my playlist. It was really quite crazy. I don't think I've ever told anyone that, actually.
Wow. You've told a few now.
I've told a few people now. Yeah. But that was the moment where in my spirit, I knew we were done. Because staying was more harmful to my kids than leaving. And I just explained exactly that. Mummy and daddy still really care about each other, but we're going to live in different houses. And we're still a team and we still care about you. And I'm very conscious that not everyone out there is blessed enough to have to be separating from someone who they can effectively co-parent with. I am very aware that there are ex-partners who can make your life a living hell. And so it's not something that I say lightly or flippantly. But even if there is a partner who's hell-bent on making your life a living hell, it is still possible to an extent, protect and mold the impact that has on your kids.
Because I think even they don't need to be making your life a living hell, but it's sort of like, imagine you're in a situation where you're both staying for the child, and neither of them, well, both of them are probably looking at each other saying, "Can you just break up with me?" without saying it.
Yeah.
Because the one that pulls the pin is the one, well, you wanted this, you did this, right?
Yeah.
And then they can say to the child, well, I didn't break it off. I was prepared to stick out through all of this. And so that's not necessarily making life torturous, but it's sort of like this whole thing of, well, I don't want to accept responsibility from it, because and again, it does all come from what I believe the people doing this, it's a genuine desire to do what they feel is best for the child.
Yeah.
And they truly believe that.
Yeah.
And so let's maybe explore some of the benefits then. Let's play devil's advocate, right? Let's just say you got two people who just genuinely want to are only together because of the child, because they're miserable in most other aspects. What's some of the benefits of them working together to stay in the same home versus actually sort of separating, as opposed to coming at it from a fairly one-eyed approach?
Do you mean separating but under one roof, or do you mean working together to reconcile their relationship?
Well, let's just say yes. If you can reconcile, obviously that's the best thing, right?
Yep.
But assume that you can't. But let's just say you put up with it, right? And you're still not reconciling the relationship, but you're tolerating the relationship to a certain degree, but you're still there for the child. What's some of the benefits of doing that for the child, in your opinion?
Only practical.
So
there is no only practical.
So it's sort of like they still have, okay, so for me, if I had to play, devil's advocate on this one, it'll be the child has still access to both mum and dad predominantly at the same time. They don't have to share, because one thing Darcy will tell me as a very wise, almost 11-year-old, she goes, "Dad, you don't have to move every week. I do." And so I have these things over at mum's place that I really want at your place. I've got these things over at your place I really want at mum's place. And so that's a practicality of having, being together in my mind. Also the perception that we are still a family. I also say,
that's a dangerous one. That's a really dangerous one, because how we learn the programs of what a family looks like is the family that we have when we're a kid. So if I learn, so say for example, and this, when I'm doing family work and relationship work, this is exactly the questions I start with. Where did you learn what a marriage looks like, or what a partnership looks like? Well,
mum and dad.
Mum and dad. And so what does that look like? Well, that looked like dad working all day. It looked like mum doing this, doing that. And so I do that at the start because it's very, very confronting for people to realize that they are repeating the patterns that they observed in their early life simply because they don't know any different. That is what it looks like. And so I remember my first wedding, looking around going, there is not, and I distinctly remember this because it was extremely unsettling. And I looked around and I thought, there is not a single relationship here that I hope mine turns out like. And I realized that I had never been exposed to what a healthy relationship looks like. How do you handle conflict? Should you fight? Should you not fight? Should you fight in front of the kids? Should you make up in front of the kids? How often should you have sex? Should you go on holidays? Who should cook? Who should clean? How do you express your opinions? Do you keep your mouth shut? Do you, like, all these things? I only knew what I knew, but what I knew wasn't necessarily healthy. So my family dynamic, I actually did not have the choice and agency that was kind of deceived into thinking that I had. Because if I could make a conscious choice, I would choose a healthy relationship, but I can't choose a healthy relationship if I don't know what that looks like. Does that make sense? So when my answer was practicalities, the benefit of staying together is practicalities. That's all I can really think of. Practicalities from a financial perspective, practicalities of, the coming back and forth, the movement of, like, how annoying is it? Even school shoes, and you got to always be taking things back and forth, and that is impractical. But what the children learn from that is potentially massively more damaging.
Because they're just going to look for or find comfort in the relationship as a parent that you have with your partner, because it's familiar. It's more familiar than it is. Yeah.
And if I ask the question, what does love look like? Well, even the love languages thing, our love languages were all influenced by how love was shown when we were kids.
Right. So we're not talking like love language, like touch, acts of service, gift.
Yeah, it can be. Absolutely. All those things can be influenced by, what does love look like to you? If you were feeling really loved, what would someone be saying, doing, touching? And how we respond to that is influenced by our early life experiences, what love looked like in our home. And so for some people, like my ex-husband shows love, and my kids know this. They're the ones who tell me this. I love them through cuddles and quality time and attention and affection. That's not how their dad isn't capable of that kind of love. He didn't have it. It wasn't safe for him. But he can love them through buying them gifts and acts of service. So love can look different. And so I guess when you can understand that living in two separate homes may be impractical, but the caveat to this is, can you live in two separate homes and actually be happy? Because I have also had clients who separated from their partners 20 years ago and are still, they might as well still be in the relationship. They're still trapped in complaining about it. They haven't broken free from the relationship. They've never really moved on. They're still tied up in hurt. They're still tied up in blame and resentment. And if removing yourself from the relationship and moving on physically doesn't actually support you to move on emotionally and mentally, then you are no better off, and you might as well still be in the relationship.
And I suppose that goes for you making your own personal decision as the person listening to this, and sort of going, like, when you take the leap of faith, which it is a leap of faith, especially for, I know, Ash, you probably felt the same way as sort of I did, that it wasn't a light decision to do this. Like, and so when you take the leap of faith, there is going to be that, you're sort of jumping, but I'm not sort of flying just yet. I'm falling, because you're taking the jump before you start to learn to flap your arms, and then, after a while, start flying, and then start gliding. But just because you're never going to have that comfort. If people had that comfort that they know exactly what they're doing is exactly the right thing, and they can see the future, they can see their kids are going, and everything's laid out in front of you, it'd be the easiest decision to make. Apparently, it doesn't happen in this lifetime. Okay.
Yeah.
So you are going to be forced to go within and just sort of ask yourself, am I happy?
Mm.
And if the
How
answer is
how am
no,
I being? How am I
yeah,
being while doing? Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
It's a,
It's not
it's
about
a
the
like,
outcome. It's not
well,
at all about the outcome.
because your happiness, unless you're an absolute brat of a person, which I'm assuming most people are not, that it's not sort of like, I'm not happy because I don't have this thing, or the expectations are too high, or all of these things. All of this is fueled from, and even the people that I have come across that have woefully high expectations, it's normally because they need to set the expectations that high so they can justify the fact they're not happy, so they can move on. If they didn't have to
Mhm.
justify it, they'll just simply move on.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult decision. It's not easy. But if you're not happy and you spend more time thinking about the grass is greener on the other side, whether it is or not, it's something that you are being intuitively led to do.
Or to at
Uh,
least explore. At least explore.
yes,
Explore with curiosity before the doing part. And this is
sure.
something that I would really, really, really explain in detail is it's not about the outcome. There's no good outcome. It's not about saying you should break up or you should stay. That's not what this conversation is. The conversation really is understanding, well, I can stay and be unhappy. I can leave and be unhappy, or I can stay and do some healing, or I can leave and do some healing. Because regardless of the outcome, can I be at peace and regulated with that
Mm,
outcome? And that is so much more important. It's because a broken home has not got anything to do with whether or not you have one house, two houses, in a relationship, not in a relationship. A broken home doesn't come from that. A broken home comes from an unconscious home. An unconscious home is a home where we are at the mercy of patterns. We're not in
mm,
control. There's no intention. There's no consciousness. And it's almost like we are not the ones making the choices. We're victims to our circumstance. And so when I have a very, very confronting conversation with people right up front, and I will say to them, are we working towards a conscious coming together or a conscious separation? Either way, there's going to be healing. Because if you are both 2 feet in, no matter what has happened in your relationship, even if there's been lying, cheating, all kinds of things, gambling, you can turn that around because all those behaviors are just stemming from your own past and your own wounding. We can absolutely turn that around, in which case you can stay together, you can have a healthy relationship, you can work
mm,
on that, you can have a family life and nurture your children in a healthy environment where they are going to grow up to see two parents who are committed to being better. Or you can separate and we can still do the work where you are regulated, where you can separate and actually have appreciation and gratitude and love, bring love, like having a heart posture of love in that circumstance.
mm,
And that's really powerful because it means that you can be separated and not mess up your children. You can stay together and not mess up your children. So the defining factor of messing up our children is not whether we separate or whether we stay together. The defining factor of whether we mess up our children is, can we overcome whatever the barriers are to peace, connection, presence, love, joy, patience, and all those things. And is it
mm,
what we want? If it's not what we want, because we can heal, we can come back into our centered, aligned space and realize that we were only with that person from the space of our wounding. And when we come back into our centered, aligned space, then that's not the person we want to do life with. And that's okay.
And it may even be a situation, and look, I appreciate everything you just said. So maybe before, when I said, if you're not happy, maybe we replace that, if you're not at peace with the
Yeah.
situation, right? If you're not at peace with the situation, that is the clue that the path you're on needs to change. You're on the
Yeah.
wrong path.
Yes.
So that's sort of a guide. So don't fight that, because that's your own feeling. No one else is putting that on you.
Mhm.
Right? If you're seeking to talk to other people and they're telling you that, it's only because it started from within you that you're not at peace with this. Because if you're not
Yeah.
at peace with this, it wouldn't be troubling. But
100%.
it could even, from the point you're sort of saying, coming together with someone with a wounding, and I want to take that aspect. I also want to take the other thing which you were saying is a highly conscious breakup, or a conscious breakup, or a
Mhm.
conscious understanding, or a conscious healing. Now, imagine two people coming together through the laws of attraction. There's similar woundings. And then ideally, as one person starts to embrace becoming more conscious and healing and things like that, the other partner does as well. And so they start to grow together.
Mhm.
Sometimes, and I'm sure you've seen it a lot, is one person starts and grows and the other one puts up with it. And so it's not as though, what may have worked previously and what did work. Because when you think about it, when we first got together, whatever, it was great. We had these things, you're that person, I'm that person. It was great. But like a frog being slowly boiled in the pot,
Mhm.
we've now gotten around and it's gone from being warm to I see bubbles around me. What's going on?
Yeah. A
So,
breaking point.
yeah. And so there's those two things combining together. And it's not like, you came together trauma bonding. It could have just been you're a perfect alignment at that time.
For where you were at.
Exactly. And so it's really coming back to, you don't need to be ashamed of yourself to be at this point. Because I do feel that comes into it. It
Mm.
certainly sure as hell came into it for me,
Yeah.
especially when I went through my second divorce. Like, part of me was sort of thinking, what have I done? Why did I just get married and then just get divorced again? So part of me was sort of thinking, even though I was not at peace with the second marriage, a massive part of me to keep me staying wasn't necessarily kids, because I didn't have kids with my second wife. But it was that whole thing of, oh mate, like, what, you don't know what you're doing.
And what will
For those,
people think of me?
yeah, I'm like one marriage away from being Ross from Friends. Okay, it's not a challenge, right? But it's sort of it's all of these things. So a lot of outside of that, you might be staying with someone because you're starting to think of things through shame or fear or ego. What is this
Mhm.
person going to say about me if I instigate this exit, this separation?
Yeah.
Because that person's going to be hurt, because that person hasn't, whether they felt that it was okay or not. If you feel as though you want more, the other person doesn't, and you separate from that, and they're prepared to be miserable, but you're not, then you're probably going to cop it from that person, either a little bit or a lot.
Yeah.
And the way in which society will judge you, because factually speaking, if you're the one that left, and if you're a dad as well, there's a whole new context of a dad leaving, and the way society views that. Wow, don't get me started on that. That, yeah, it's messy, and you've got all of this ahead of you, and there's probably all the reasons why you're staying. But just remember, that peace that you don't have within you is from within you, and it's yours for a reason. It's not
Yeah.
anybody else's,
It's
and
an
that's
invitation.
all. Yes.
Yeah. It's an invitation. And I really loved what you said about it's telling you that you're not on the right path and your path has to change. Don't automatically take that as I have to end my relationship, because that's not what it's saying at all. It says your
Truth.
relationship has to change. It doesn't
Yes.
say it has to end. And so
Absolutely.
the first path, no matter how badly you feel you're at the breaking point, there is nothing that that you can't come back from. And so I would encourage you that
If you're both on the same page.
yes, exactly, which is where
If
I'm
you
going.
If you're
which is
both on the same page, yeah.
which is where I'm going. So your first step has to be, we've done whole episodes on mind body awareness and these kinds of things. Your first step has to be having awareness of that guiding light inside you. And sometimes that feels like a lot of resistance, and sometimes that feels like a lot of pain, or anxiety, or whatever it might be. That is just making noise to get your attention. And the attention should be curiosity and acknowledgement, going, okay, so there's resistance coming up in me, so something needs to change. The questions then become, do I know how to change? Maybe you need a therapist, maybe you need a coach, maybe you need some support. And is the other person willing to grow with me?
Boom.
Because that is, so the defining factor or the deciding factor of whether you stay together or separate isn't about anything other than, are they willing to grow with me? And I said after my first husband that I would never get married again. And just by default, by saying first husband, it indicates that I have a second husband. But the only reason that I agreed to marry my husband is because I had evidence, hard evidence, not built off hopes and fantasies, but actual hard evidence that he was willing to do the work and grow with me. And what that says is that being right for each other right now is wonderful. It feels so beautiful. But being right for each other right now does not say that you're going to be right for each other in 10 years, 50 years. So being right for each other completely, if that's your only justification or only thing that's saying, I want to stay in this relationship because we used to be so good together, is a terrible justification, because everyone learns and grows. Everyone's interests change and perspectives change and body size and shape changes. And there's changes that happen constantly. And so if we can be with someone who is as committed to growing as what we are, it means that even through the seasons of change, even through the seasons of not seeming right for each other, we're willing to do the work to grow. And I had evidence of that. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I love the fact that you had evidence, but I'd sort of say what I'm hearing that you're saying is that you had trust.
Yes.
In him.
But the trust comes from seeing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there has to be
someone to go, oh yeah, I'm willing to do that. Yeah, I'm willing to change. But then their actions don't support it.
Absolutely, but it then comes down to trust. So it's sort of like, yes, you can talk about being the change, or you just trust that that person's going to change, and it may come from evidence, through talking about it, through whatever it is. I just had this picture of people going around, after this podcast, going, "Show me evidence, give me evidence," right?
No,
I'll get the clipboard out, but it's just more about, for you personally, feeling I trust, and it's going to have to be through. They'll sit in the mud with you. They'll walk with you. They'll have the hard conversations with you. They'll be vulnerable with you. And I'm not putting a gender on this, because this is gender fluid. These is just the things. You respect them and they respect you, and they show that not in every big grandiose things, but every little day, every little thing, there's that sort of understanding. Yes, you're going to have fights and arguments. Yes, you're going to have all of that, but it's about, do you know me? Do I feel seen? Do I trust you? Are we together in this? And do we trust each other to grow together as well?
Yeah. And will you do what you say you'll do?
Oh, that's a big one for me. Oh.
Will you do what you say you'll do? And again, this is when I'm talking about evidence. It's one thing. Like, I would not have married my husband if he said he was going to do this. Yeah, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to do this work, but then never took action on anything.
100%.
I would never, because there's no trust there, because he hasn't done what he said he would do. And so when I say I had evidence, over a period of time, he was willing to have the conversations that we needed to have. He was willing to take action on the conversations.
Mm.
And then there was actual things that changed. So that says to me that we both have a commitment to doing better and being better. And even though sometimes it's really uncomfortable and the ego really hurts because we have to see a side to ourselves that's ugly to see, or, those kinds of things, you want a partner who's willing to see it and who will grow with you.
Yeah,
So,
because being wrong is not a pleasant feeling. And, I would say to people, and anyone who knows me very well would know that I don't mind being wrong, but I love being right. Because yes, it's like I don't want to be the problem, but the great thing about if something's been shown to you where you are the problem, then you've got the ultimate ability to be the change,
yeah.
to fix it. This has been quite a big one, Ash. Broken home definition, coming down to relationships, and just everything like that. And just look, a big caveat when we're talking about he and she, and male and female, we're just talking about how, like, the polarities of the energy of yes, but I've married 2 females. Ash is married to a guy, but it doesn't need to be simply a heterosexual thing thrown over that. It's just talking about the different energies here. So
Any relationship.
absolutely, absolutely. And look, for those of you who have stumbled across this video because you wanted to find out more, because you're curious about the fact about being in a broken home and with kids, our hearts go out to you. It's a tough one. We send our love to you, because it's not going to be where you are now. Is probably not an easy thing. So, and there you can't make the wrong decision. Whichever way you decide, you simply can't make the wrong decision. Commit to it. But really, if you're staying together with someone, then you have to understand, or know, or get an understanding from them. Are they prepared to work with you, as Ash said, or not? And then from there, what are you showing the child?
Yeah.
What are they going to get from it? How are you modeling the treatment that you give your partner? How are you modeling the treatment that you are allowing from your partner, good and bad? And how is it that when you place your child as a grown adult in a relationship, would you be proud if they were in that same relationship?
Yeah. Well, yeah, 100%. That's so massive. Very well summed up, Dave. And I think the only thing I would add to that, which feels very strong for me, is if you are choosing to stay in the relationship, you are already one step ahead, because it's been your choice. You're not there because you're stuck there. You're not there because you're not even aware of any other alternative. You're there because you're choosing it. And if you choose it today and then you get 12 months down the track and it becomes even harder to choose and you choose differently, that's okay. But being empowered means stepping into your agency of choice. And when you can bring that agency of choice already, that is a much more empowering position, because you know that everything that comes as a consequence of your choice is only coming because you've chosen it. And that was a really big one for me, to know that the fights and the conflict and the heartache and the hurt that was coming my way was only coming my way because I was still choosing that relationship. And at any time I had the capacity to choose otherwise. And so it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like an instant choice and then it happened. It was a matter of seeing the consequences. It was like the consequences and red flags just became more obvious and more obvious and more obvious and more obvious, and I was more willing to see it. And over time, I went, I want to choose something different now. And so it's okay. It's okay to choose. It's okay to choose even if others don't understand it. And it's okay for your choice to change.
I'll give that one a mic drop. That was a great one. Absolutely.
Amazing episode. Great to have you all joining us. Go and check out some of our other episodes. I think some of the relevant stuff that we've spoken about is people pleasing and fear of rejection, really big ones that come here. And let us know in the comments if you want us to go deeper into anything that we spoke about today, particularly how your choice might be affecting your kids. I think that's a really powerful one.
That's a big one. All right. Thank you, Ash. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, you will. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.